The bright and shining city of Miami Beach is a huge vacation destination. But in the 1980s, it's a totally different story.
But Miami does have a dark side. In fact, in the 1980s, Miami Beach was considered to be the US murder capital.
The title isn't enough to stop one German couple from visiting multiple times a year. The couple make a hobby out of shooting guns together while they are in town.
And as you know, when you're a gun collector, one is never enough.
But a late-night drive gets them lost.
What would you do when you're a lost tourist if not ask for directions?
And they aren't the only ones with a gun. Kersten Kishnick is born in Germany in the mid-1950s.
Kersten Kishnick begins a relationship with Dieter Reichmann sometime in the early 70s.
So we don't really know that much about how they met originally, but we do know that by 1974 they were dating. This is when Kersten takes Dieter home to meet her family, so we can assume it was fairly serious. They were together for a long time, a better part of a decade, and in that time, of course, they sort of became one. Their lives became intertwined. They had mutual friends that they would spend time together. They had a lot of mutual interests.
But their relationship isn't without its ups and downs. Kersten and Dieter separate for an unknown amount of time around 1980. The cause is a mystery, but they are able to reconcile and are back together by 1983.
Kersten and Dieter love to travel, and it seems they have a favorite destination. They seem to love to go to Miami. Who doesn't love Miami? The sun, the surf, the palm trees. They went there twice in 1986.
Dieter loves to shoot and collect guns, but gun control laws back in Germany prevent him from doing so. While in Florida, he buys 2 guns so that he and Kersten can take multiple trips to the shooting range.
Dieter seemed to have an affinity for guns, so much so that he purchased a few while in the US. But because the gun laws are so strict in Germany, he ended up leaving them in the US with an attorney in Florida. This way, when he returns to Florida, he can pick them up.
After finding someone to hold on to their guns, the vacation comes to an end, and Kersten and Dieter return home to Germany. But it isn't long before another trip to Florida is booked. Kersten and Dieter plan a trip to return in October the very next year. Miami Beach is a beautiful vacation destination, renowned for its beautiful weather and sandy beaches.
It's a place to relax and to party, and perhaps even retire.
Miami is a popular tourist destination for many reasons. For those who love architecture, it's one of the best places to go to see Art Deco architecture. It's got one of the largest concentrations of it in the US. It's also great for different neighborhoods like Little Havana. It's a great quirky place to spend some time.
The city plays host to all kinds of festivals, conferences, and showcases. And once arriving, everyone is sure to find something exciting between the high-end shopping, fine dining, and the wild nightlife. But the city hasn't always been as bright and shiny as it appears on first glance.
Miami Beach kept cops busy in the 1980s. It was a hotbed of crime and corruption, with gang violence and the drug trade driving a lot of the problems.
This is Miami Beach, as Kersten and Dieter know it. The city they have traveled to multiple times and enjoyed enough to return once again. They arrive on October 2nd, 1987, and plan to stay through October 31st. The first stop when they get into the country is for Dieter to rent a car to help them get around. This vehicle comes with insurance that promises double indemnity in the event of a passenger's accidental death in the vehicle. While the couple is ostensibly back in Florida for a vacation, Dieter has a secondary purpose for the visit.
Dieter's plans are to spend a portion of this current vacation looking at real estate. He's hoping to open a clothing boutique here in the US.
On October 9th, they go back to the local attorney to retrieve the guns that they had left on their previous visit.
One of the things the couples share is an interest in guns. And as you know, when you're a gun collector, one is never enough. When Kersten sees a gun she likes in a magazine, he has to buy that one too.
While buying the third gun, they also pick up some ammunition for each of the guns. From there, they are off to the shooting range to enjoy their new purchases. Over the next few weeks, Kersten and Dieter take in the sights around the city, exploring the local hotspots. On the evening of October 25th, the couple finds themselves at a Brazilian cocktail bar in the marketplace for dinner.
According to reports, on the evening in question, they were both seen having a great time.
They continue to drink until 10 at night, when they have the idea of going to the Welcome to Miami Beach sign to take pictures.
Soon after they leave the cocktail bar, they unfortunately get lost. Whether this is because they had too much to drink or they were just tourists and unfamiliar with the neighborhood is anyone's guess.
For nearly the next half hour, Dieter drives them around the Miami Beach streets. When he realizes he doesn't know how to get to the sign, he starts looking around for someone he can ask for directions.
A group of drug dealers standing on a street corner see Dieter slow driving. Believing that he might be looking to make a purchase, one of the drug dealers calls out to the car.
Dieter pulls a U-turn, heading back toward the voice. This could be the help they need to find their way. When Dieter stops, it's not just one man that comes up next to the car. And as they get closer, they don't look like they want to help.
What would you do when you're a lost tourist if not ask for directions? However, this time, they're going to get more than they bargained for.
According to Dieter, he tries his best to get it across that they are only looking for directions. But these men have their own agenda, and certainly it is not to help these tourists. But it's the 1980s, and Miami Beach is awash in drugs, and the cartels ensure that life for those on the streets pushing the product is fast, brutal, and unforgiving. It is a lesson that, according to Dieter, they learned the hard way. Kersten Kishnick and Dieter Reichmann are a couple from Germany. They meet in the 1970s, and even when their relationship has some hiccups, they come back as the years go by. Beginning in 1986, the couple starts making regular trips to Florida. But Miami Beach in the 80s is not the same as it is today. Crime is rampant. Gang violence is on the rise. Miami Beach has earned the title of America's murder capital. They plan their third trip to Miami Beach to last from October 2nd through October 31st of 1987. As they get to their final week in the city, on October 25th, they go out for drinks at a Brazilian cocktail bar. Kersten and Dieter want to get a picture in front of the Welcome to Miami Beach sign before their vacation ends. They get lost and stop to ask for directions.
The shot rings out in the night. Everybody turns to look. Dieter hits the gas and drives away as fast as the car can take him.
Dieter speeds down the street to get away. He turns to Kersten and touches her face, only to find it covered in blood. She's been shot.
The flight to get away becomes even more urgent when Dieter realizes that they're not just trying to get away from someone shooting at them, but Kersten actually needs help.
He drives until he finds a police officer and gets out of his vehicle to beg for help. Kersten's life is on the line, and if he can't find help, it could be her end.
You know, a police officer is trained to expect anything, really. Somebody here, frantic, covered in blood, asking for somebody else to be helped. The officer's first instinct would be to look for the injured person, but also keep in mind that this person here, standing in front of them with blood on them, may also be a potential threat to themselves or somebody else.
When someone approaches you and they're frantic, the first thing that comes to mind is your own safety, because police officer safety is paramount to public safety.
So many things run through an officer's mind in those situations, from looking after a potential injured person, protecting other people, protecting themselves from a potential threat, and also preserving any evidence of a crime that may have been committed that you don't know about yet.
The police officer finds Kersten bleeding out in the car. They check her pulse, finding she is alive, but barely holding on. A call goes out to get a medic on site immediately. It only takes 2 minutes for them to arrive.
When paramedics arrive, Dieter is distraught and is begging to go back to the vehicle to see how his girlfriend is doing, but police keep him back. They want to preserve the crime scene. They want to reduce any more escalation of the trauma of the situation, and they want to give the paramedics room to work.
As fast as a fire rescue is, the odds are not in their favor.
People have been known to survive gunshot wounds that would be unbelievable. Surviving a gunshot to the head depends on the caliber of bullet that's used, how close range it was, and luck. Because a .22, for example, ricochets, it'll go in but not out, whereas a .38 might go right through. Going straight through often is better because it avoids that ricochet thing. But if it's a big caliber bullet, it's gonna do more damage too. So surviving a bullet wound to the head is pretty rare.
As much as Dieter asks to go back to the car to see Kersten, the police keep him away.
There are a number of reasons why an officer would keep a loved one away from an injured family member or spouse, mostly for the protection of that person so that medics or other emergency responders are able to care for them in a safe manner. We don't want somebody getting in the way unnecessarily, even though we understand it's a very traumatic event for them. There is also the possibility that this person may have committed a crime, may have actually caused the injury themselves, and is attempting to interfere in a crime scene. They may also be a potential threat to the emergency responders. So it's very important that the emergency professionals are allowed to do what they need to do, and everything else can be sorted out afterwards.
Kersten does not survive her injuries. Given the circumstance and her presumed cause of death, the rental car is immediately considered a crime scene and a murder investigation begins to unfold. A detective with the Miami Beach Police Department arrives and begins taking in the crime scene.
When you first arrive at the scene, you want to find the officer that's able to brief you on what's going on and walk you through the crime scene. It's important to know who was there first, what they touched, what's been moved, because all that may play a part down the road in the investigation.
If a potential victim has already been removed from the scene, it would be very important for the investigators to know sort of where that person was lying or how they were positioned when they were found.
Where was the person seated in the car as a passenger per se? Where was the driver seated? Which way was the passenger facing? In this case, the passenger was shot.
The first responders, the initial officers on the scene, are able to provide valuable information with respect to who was around at the time. You know, what were the weather conditions like? Where was the body or person located? Were any weapons in the vicinity? There are all kinds of bits of information that those first responders are going to provide to the detectives.
It's completely relevant to know which way the passenger was facing. Where were the articles in the vehicle? Was there perhaps a jacket on the seat? Was there a blanket on the seat? What was the driver wearing? What was the passenger wearing? All of these things become relevant, and the only person that likely knows that are the first officers on the scene.
Further investigation into the blood inside of the car starts to raise questions in the detective's mind.
When there's blood found at a crime scene, we can determine the direction that an injury may have come from, the trajectory of a bullet, for example, and we can also estimate the caliber of the possible bullet used and the range from which it was fired. We also might be able to identify a victim if they're not still in the position that they were assaulted in by taking samples from this blood spatter. In this instance, we know that the victim had an entry wound on the right side of her skull, and there was splatter across the driver's side of the car. She was seated in the passenger seat. So from the blood splatter pattern that occurs there, we can tell that the direction the bullet and the trajectory it went. And we expect to see blood splatter over anything that was on the driver's side of the vehicle. In this instance, there was blood splatter on the driver's side of the vehicle, except there was no blood splatter on the seat belt. So this either means that the driver was not wearing the seatbelt, or that the driver was actually not in the vehicle and the seatbelt was retracted.
Kersten and Dieter's vacation has come to an abrupt end, but this investigation has just begun. Miami Beach in the 1980s is a city where the drugs flow freely and crime runs rampant. Kersten Kishnick and Dieter Reichmann are a German couple who have flown to America on vacation. On the night of October 25, 1987, the couple goes out for a night on the town. But when they get lost searching for the Welcome to Miami beach sign, the vacation takes a drastic turn. Kersten takes a bullet through her head and does not survive. But the question remains, who fired the gun?
Dieter's English isn't perfect, but on this night in particular, with the emotions so high and having drunk some alcohol, which the police can smell, he's stumbling with his words even more than he ordinarily would.
In the case of a shooting, a gunshot wound, once a victim has been cared for, there's no immediate need to look after that person if they're deceased, for example. One of the primary functions at that point of the detectives is to preserve any evidence. Gunshot residue is something that is not there forever. So if there's a potential for a person to have gunshot residue on them, then it's imperative that the detectives try to obtain a sample of that as soon as possible. Gunshot residue can provide any number of clues to an investigator, depending on how it is dispersed on the person. Gunshot residue on a person who fired the weapon is very different from gunshot residue that would be found on somebody in the vicinity of a gunshot. So those types of pieces of information would be very helpful in determining whether somebody may be a suspect or whether they may be related to the victim or part of the event in some other way.
Dieter is brought to the police station for questioning. But the police that bring him in leave him in a holding room for about an hour. When the detective on the case finds out that Dieter has been kept in a holding room, they go to get him and apologize for this treatment. But they can't let Dieter leave just yet. They need him to make a statement about the events of the night.
Investigators will attempt to get a first-person account of what occurred from a witness or a victim. These accounts often provide details that may become forgotten later on. They may become watered down over time as a person introduces things that they hear about, what may have happened as opposed to what actually occurred. So getting initial information as soon as possible is the best place to start.
Dieter tells a story of what happened earlier in the evening. He explains that he and Kersten were hoping to get pictures next to the Welcome to Miami beach sign, but they got lost. He asks for directions, but senses danger. When he hears an explosion, he speeds away from the scene.
Kersten was seated in the passenger side of a vehicle that had an open window. She had a bullet wound directly above her right ear. It's most likely that the shooter was positioned on the passenger side of the car at the window. Kersten would have been facing forward in order to be shot on the right side of her head, and the blood splatter across the steering wheel on the opposite side of the car makes that even more evident.
The next morning, the police accompanied Dieter back to his motel room. Among other things, they find his collection of 3 guns, as well as ammo for them.
At this point in the investigation, it would appear that Dieter is really the only person that may be considered close to being a suspect. Whether they actually consider him a suspect or not, he's a person of interest in the investigation. And it's important for investigators that he not be able to leave the country where they may not be able to get him back to continue any investigation with him. So taking his passport away prevents him from being able to leave the jurisdiction.
Though the guns and ammo are especially interesting to the investigators. They find a box of .38 ammo, which can fit into 2 of the 3 guns, a special Taurus revolver, and a FIE 38 Special Derringer. Dieter spends the next 4 days going on drive-arounds with the police, and they try to find the location where the shooting occurred. He is unable to identify the exact location, but does eventually say the area of 63rd and Biscayne Boulevard at least looks familiar.
Even though police are attempting to verify Dieter's story, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's no longer a suspect.
It's statistically known that homicides are committed by people known to the victim. That's sort of a starting point for investigators. So we really know at this point that the only person around that knew the victim is Dieter. But his account of what happened is pretty unreliable because of the condition he was in.
On November 12, 1987, there's a similar event. A robbery in Florida leads to the murder of 2 salespeople. The surviving employee, Robert Henry, tells the police that he was abducted by 3 men who committed the crime.
It's the perfect alibi, right? You just invent a group of people that apparently committed this crime. How are the police ever going to find out that these people don't exist? How are they supposed to figure that out? In the time that takes, you have a chance to get away or develop a better story.
Robert Henry is eventually caught and incriminates himself with his own changing testimony.
So as these stories start to unravel and the alibi provided by the perpetrator is proven to be false, police then sort of dig their heels in and they start looking a little harder. And in this particular case, the relationship between Dieter and Kersten, it becomes part of the focus.
But there's only one way to know for sure if Dieter is telling the truth. And that is to look into details of his story.
The police are continuing to investigate Dieter's story, which leads them to the Brazilian cocktail bar. They talked to a waiter there who remembers the couple and said that they had 6 drinks each and did appear intoxicated by the time they left.
While looking into Dieter's guns, investigators discover that they have been purchased illegally. All 3 handguns are bought by showing a Florida's driver's license that lists a non-existent Miami Beach address. Dieter is brought back to the police station for another interview on October 29th. The interview lasts 4 to 5 hours while the investigators try to understand everything that occurred the night of the murder.
At this point, all the police have is Dieter's story. They don't have any other suspects. All they have is Dieter's story and the fact that he owns some guns.
At the end of the interview, Dieter is arrested for federal gun charges and is to be held in custody until he can stand trial. Kersten Kishnick and Dieter Reichman are a German couple on vacation in Miami Beach, Florida. But that vacation comes to a bloody end when Kersten is shot during the night out. Dieter is the only witness to the shooting, but is unable to identify where exactly the shooting may have taken place. During the investigation, it comes out that Dieter has been making illegal purchases of guns while in the city. He is arrested on federal gun charges and awaiting trial. Dieter is held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, a federal detention facility. He's to remain there until his trial, with his bond change set to $150,000. While Dieter is being held, the Miami Beach Police Department get in contact with police back in Germany in order to find out more about Kersten and Dieter. The German police examine Kersten and Dieter's bank accounts, question dozens of acquaintances, and obtain their life insurance policies.
Police discover Kersten had 5 different insurance policies on her, and this didn't even count the accident insurance that came with the car. All told, this amounted to over $1 million German marks, which today would be worth over $1 million US. This looks suspicious. It definitely could be a motive and certainly raises some red flags.
The life insurance policies are discovered to have been signed between 1978 and 1984, all of which named Dieter the sole beneficiary. On top of this, on June 9, 1987, Dieter and Kersten go to a courthouse in Germany to make each other the sole heir of their respective estates.
An interesting revelation in this case comes from the German investigators. Kersten is a sex worker, and Dieter acts as her pimp.
While she's said to have wanted out of this line of work, Dieter fought her on the subject. According to multiple interviews, while Dieter claimed to work, as far as anyone could tell, he was entirely dependent on the money Kersten brought in.
Ultimately, the motive that is determined is circumstantial. Well, it's certainly not evidence that a person committed a crime, but it certainly does, at the same time, focus investigators on a particular person.
With Dieter looking more and more like a potential suspect, it brings next context to previous evidence.
There's no doubt that the victim's blood was on Dieter's shirt, but how it got there remains a question. And it doesn't appear to have gotten there because of the gunshot. Dieter claims he was positioned in the driver's seat of the vehicle when Kersten was shot. Bloodstains on his shirt were large in comparison to the blood spatter that you'd expect from a bullet. The spray pattern does not match what was found on his t-shirt. If he's saying that that blood that was on his shirt got there because somebody shot her through the window, that's not the type of pattern it makes. A large blood stain on his shirt is more likely to be from him touching blood and then rubbing it on his shirt.
The blood inside the car and on the blanket continue to call into question if Dieter was in the car at all when Kersten was shot. Furthermore, results come back on the gunpowder residue test that was done on Dieter's hands on the night of the murder. While they can't conclusively say that Dieter shot a gun, there's enough evidence to say that if he didn't, his hands were in close proximity to a firing gun.
While there's no exact evidence about what took place that night, a theory is starting to form in the minds of detectives. Judging by the blood on the blanket and the steering wheel and the gunshot residue on Dieter's hands, it's clear that this crime didn't happen exactly the way he said. However, because he's a gun aficionado, the gunshot residue on his hand doesn't necessarily mean that he fired the shot that killed Kersten.
While the investigation into Kersten's murder continues, Dieter remains held and awaiting trial for his gun charges. On December 29, 1987, 2 out of 3 charges are dismissed by the judge because witnesses cannot identify a crime having been committed. He is then acquitted of the third charge by a federal jury for seemingly the same reason. The very next day, Dieter is released from custody. But when this happens, he is immediately arrested by the Miami Beach Police Department detectives for the alleged murder of Kersten Kishnick. Kersten Kishnick is a sex worker from Germany. Dieter Reichman acts as her pimp and her boyfriend. The two of them take a trip to Miami Beach in October of 1987. Thanks to a large number of life insurance policies, Dieter stands to gain upwards of 1 million German marks in the event of Kersten's murder. He is at first held in custody on gun charges, but when those are dismissed, the Miami Beach Police Department arrests him again immediately for the murder of Kersten.
Sometimes it's beneficial to wait for a judicial process to play out before you introduce new charges. It relieves the defendant of the ability to bundle a bunch of charges and try and make a deal.
On January 20th, 1988, Dieter is indicted on the two charges. One count of first-degree murder, the other for unlawfully displaying a firearm, both in connection to the murder of his girlfriend, Kersten Kishnick. The police feel they now have enough evidence in place to show that, unlike his original statement that the car was surrounded by drug dealers after the couple had lost their way, and that one of those drug dealers shot and killed Kersten, what they think happened was Dieter himself had pulled the trigger that fateful night. Certainly a theory that would make sense, as Dieter was the one who stood to benefit the most from Kersten's death.
When the perpetrator of a crime tries to come up with a story that's false to use as an alibi, not always quickly, but generally comes out in the wash. Forensic evidence provides information that's really irrefutable, and unless the person has the wherewithal to know what physical evidence the police are going to find, generally the stories or these alibis that are fake show themselves in the end.
The fact that Dieter has a number of insurance policies on Kersten, it certainly changes the jeopardy for him, and it raises an eyebrow as an investigator because he stands to benefit from her death.
Suspicions are pointing at Dieter. There's definitely evidence surrounding him, but is it enough to win a murder conviction?
Dieter spends the pre-trial claiming to be unable to recall details of the shooting beyond what he has already shared.
We know the couple were drinking. We know they were lost. So the fact that Dieter doesn't have a lot of details about that night, that could be legitimate. Or it could be part of his strategy.
The month-long trial runs from July 13th to August 12th, 1988. During the trial, Dieter admits to Kersten being a sex worker, but insists he is not and has never been a pimp.
Well, it's completely understandable that Dieter would deny any involvement of being Kersten's pimp, mostly because it's an illegal activity. But what it does on the other side of it is prove that his lifestyle, his entire existence really relied on the income that she provided. And without that income, he didn't have anything. So it makes prosecutors once again focus on the fact that his motive was greed and money, and that he was responsible for the murder of Kersten.
Well, when the revelation comes down from the German authorities that they have this sex worker pimp relationship, as an investigator, it would pique my interest to find out if he had other sources of income. And in this case, she is his source of income. And he is heavily invested in this relationship in the fact that she's his only source of income, and he's got a number of insurance policies on her.
The jury is presented with the evidence of the case. The gunshot residue found on Dieter's hands, the blood spatter around the car, and the theory as to how the night may have gone. After all the evidence is brought to the jury, they find him guilty of both charges. Their final recommendation is for the death penalty by a vote of 9-3.
Dieter is found guilty, and the motive is purely financial gain.
When we start looking at motive to commit these types of crimes as investigators, money or greed often comes up as a very powerful motive. So when a person has, multiple insurance policies that pay out large sums of money with only one beneficiary, and that beneficiary is also reliant on that person for their sole source of income or their lifestyle, motive in this case is money.
Two years later, on May 30th, 1991, Dieter attempts to appeal the judgment. But the Supreme Court of Florida is satisfied that the state met the burden of proof. On September 30th, 1994, Dieter files his first motion for post-conviction relief, making claims that the trial counsel failed to adequately investigate the case. The case is reviewed on July 19, 1996, leading to the death sentence being vacated.
From all appearances, Dieter was a man who was pushing a woman to continue a life she didn't want. When she resisted, she was worth more to him dead.
Kersten Kishnick thought she was just going on a nice vacation to America. Little did she know, she would never return to Germany again. In a city of sin and excess like Miami in the 1980s, buried under the headlines of cocaine wars, police corruption, and the South American narcos money flowing in the streets, a murder such as this seems almost quaint. Simple greed and opportunity with an unfortunate victim and the man she trusted.